Have you seen someone that told you you should sweep through your voice and find the parts that are bad and just are annoying, and you could take them out and magic, you'll sound great? Well, we're going to talk about why that's a myth, why that's inappropriate, and why that does not work and make you sound the best you can in audiobooks, voiceover, narration, podcasts, whatever you're doing. Avoid the sweeps.
Welcome into another edition of the Audio Barnyard Podcast with Don Barnes. I'm Donnie Barnes. This is where we teach you how to increase your audio quality and dramatically cut your editing and processing time. You can do that over at vojumpstart.com. Lots of courses available there, and you can also schedule a free 15-minute evaluation session with Don to look at your current setup and what you could possibly do better to increase your productivity. Today we're talking about EQ sweeping. This is something that's been a popular topic lately. There have been some engineers posting videos about how they EQ sweep clients' voices and turn up certain frequencies in their clients' voices, turn down other frequencies to make them sound better. Now, we like everyone, we respect everyone, but there are certain ideas that we just don't agree with, and we're going to be open about it when we don't. This is one of those things. We don't agree with EQ sweeping. And there are three primary reasons why we don't. So number one, results will sound different across different playback systems. When you EQ sweep, it will not sound consistent depending on what you play it back on, what software you use, what platform, what kind of speaker, what kind of headphones you use. Number two, this method plays on most narrators, especially newer narrators, insecurity about their own voice. It's natural for us to not like our voice, but that's often not the correct instinct. Number three, this also appeals to, I hate to say it because I'm on the younger side still, but this often appeals to younger, less experienced engineers. This is common across all disciplines. Young audio people tend to over-engineer things. Younger musicians tend to overplay things. Younger broadcasters, I am one, I was one, even a younger one once, they tend to overspeak, overtalk. This is common. That doesn't make it good. So Don, let's start with number one here. Why will results, when you EQ sweep, when you turn up and down specific frequencies inside people's voices, why will it sound different across different systems?
Yeah, there's so many moving parts, and I'll show you specific examples. I mean, we'll show it in action where you can hear it yourself. But just as an overview, every piece of software, when it comes to the EQ, the engineers, the software developers had to pick what math they were going to use to make this thing work. So in EQ, what does it do? It allows you, and in this case, it allows you to isolate a specific frequency. Well, there's math required to isolate frequencies within a voice, and so all the software is very different in terms of what choices they made to isolate it. And it'd be like baking a cake. There's 5,000 recipes to bake a lemon cake. And you know, which one's the right one, which one's better? Yeah, we could argue about that for decades. Point is, there's many ways to do it. It's not a settled science where there's one way to do it. And therefore, just the math being used by the EQ equalizers is totally different. Then you have hardware differences. Are you listening off of good headphones, weak headphones, great headphones? How about your studio monitors? Is your room set up right? You have other factors in terms of just the physical stuff that play into it. Your audience. Most of our audience, unfortunately, these days are going to be listening on smartphones. And then even on the smartphone, totally different. Some speakerphones are great. Some are horrible. Some people are listening off their Bluetooth. Rather, they've got in-ear monitors. That's happening all the time so they're not listening on their speakerphones. The playback systems are all different. And if you sweep, since the software that allows you to sweep is going to be different in terms of what the engineers chose when they developed it, and the playback systems that you play it back on are going to be all different, you have a high probability of taking something out of your voice that when played back across a range of tools are going to sound worse than if you had done nothing.
Yeah, so that's number one. It's not scientific, and the results are not going to be consistent across the board, not at all. Number two, narrators' insecurity about their own voice. This is typical, right? Especially when we first get into voiceover and we first hear our own voices played back to us. This was true even before you got into voiceover and narration, right? Remember the first time you heard a phone message that you left somebody, or you heard a recording of yourself somewhere and you thought, is that my voice? I don't like how I thought I sounded way better than that.
Yeah, let me show you a couple examples here because I'm just going to show you one example real quick, and I'm going to go into RX. And the reason I'm choosing RX to show this is that here's a sweep example. So for those of you that haven't seen it, I'm going to just play this audio, and I'm going to take and move this around, and you're going to hear it. So first, here it is with nothing. This is just the raw voice. It knows this because it knows where it isn't. By subtracting where it is from where it isn't, it knows this because, okay, so that's with no sweeping. That's just a plain voice. I'm using my voice because I want to make it sound terrible. I want to show you the worst of my voice. Some areas that are not good by this method, even though taking them out would make me sound worse. But so that's why I'm using my voice here. All right, here's a preview of it. And I'm now, what I've done is I'm going to isolate and make louder. I'm going to start in one spot, and then you'll see me moving around. This is also known as sweeping, going through the frequencies to find things that don't sound good. But I listen to the way it sounds here when I do this, and I'll sweep through this, and you'll go, oh, okay, I see. Because you would, by the way, if you heard this the first time, the way I'm doing it exaggerated now, you'd go, wow, those are terrible sounds. I got to take some of those out. Check this out. It knows this because it knows where it isn't. By subtracting where it is from where it isn't, it knows this because it knows where it isn't. By subtracting where it is from where it isn't. Okay, so that's two examples. And you can hear that it already sounds bad. But here's the funny thing. This is out of context. The developers of this piece of software had all sorts of situations that they could have done different. They could have chosen different math. And what they've done in this is they've given us options. Most of us don't explore the options, but watch this. I'm gonna do the same thing. I'm gonna switch to some of the options. What you're gonna see is these are the kind of options that somebody would have in Studio One or Reaper or Audacity or Audition or Twisted Wave. These are the things that they would have that they could have chosen, and they only choose one. They don't allow you, like I can here, do 4 or 5 different ones. Listen to this now. It knows this because it knows where it isn't. By subtracting where it is from where it isn't, it knows this because it knows where it isn't. By subtracting where it is from where it isn't, it knows this because it knows where it isn't. By subtracting where it is from where it isn't, it knows this because it knows where it isn't. Now, by the way, that ringing sound is a well-known phenomenon. That ringing sound has nothing to do with my voice. You hear that little ring that's in there, Donna? Can you hear that? It knows this because it... Okay, so there's a ring in it. That ring is not in my voice. What it is the actual math produces it. Watch, I'm going to show it. I'm going to actually render it out, and what you'll do is you'll see the ring. You see that line that's down there? That's a software that's also known in the business as an artifact. It is a negative byproduct of some processing. And I'm exaggerating it, but you can see it there. But watch this. I'm going to choose different options. I'm going to undo that. I'm going to render that again, and you'll notice it's still there, but it's different in terms of the quality. It's not this solid line. That's with one. I go through, I undo that, and do another one, and this is just an example, and I render that out. Now that's closer to the line that we got in the first, but it's not totally. The first one, I'm switching this back. I'm going to undo that, render it again. See how bright and solid that line is? So depending on what you're doing and depending on what options you choose, and the developers of every piece of software, I'll show one more, got to make some decisions. Look how tall it is there, and it's not so bright compared to when it's on the default one. And so the question is, what did your developers for your software do, and what did they pick? And this is just an example. These guys could have had, they had more options than what they showed here, and they kind of said, oh, we're not going to get so granular that we're going to give them every 6 hertz in here once we get into the higher ranges. But there's this natural thing that occurs, which is this. When you isolate frequencies, the math that's used to isolate introduces its own issues any more than when you isolate vanilla extract into a little bottle like this. By itself, it's horrible. I'll just tell you that. Try it, though. I mean, don't take my word for it. Try it one time, but I am not responsible for you feeling like, I mean, it's not good. Take a very tiny amount, but it's fun to do once in your life. You will find I could have shown more examples, and if we go to Studio One, they allow the same sort of thing, but this I'll play you the same example. It's probably not at the exact same spot here. We'll play it in a loop. The Artificial Intelligence Autopilot, AIA, uses deviations to generate corrective commands. The Artificial Intelligence Autopilot, AIA, uses deviations to generate corrective commands. The Artificial Intelligence Autopilot. I mean, you see how bad I sound there? I mean, that's terrible. That's why I'm using my voice. But that's not in my voice. That is a result from the math required to isolate this the way I'm doing it. And every piece of software even labels it different. So I can't even do a direct comparison. For example, the Q here, which is how steep this is. Watch as I adjust this down. I can change the Q like this so it looks different. And when I do that, they're not even the same. I go over here to Reaper, and Reaper does a great job with the same thing. I could go ahead over here and play it on it because it knows where it isn't. By subtracting where it is from where it isn't, or where it, and their whole thing is the same cue. You can see that it visually does the same thing, but their numbering is totally different. It maxes out at 4, and it's at 0.01 when it's at the minimum. Even the numbering systems are different between different pieces of software. So when you combine all these factors, it has nothing to do with my headphones, my monitors, what I'm listening on, what it needs to sound like at the end of the day. I could go on for hours and geek out on this stuff as to why that makes no sense to sweep through your audio. Okay, so I hope that gives you, Donnie, what did I miss there?
Well, I think this is the most fundamental point. There are a lot of things about audio and about voiceover and narration that are totally subjective. And certainly those of us who have gotten clients, tried to get clients, auditioned for things, been rejected for things over the years, we know how subjective this business can be. But when people try to say that EQ sweeping your voice is a scientific process, it's absolutely objectively not.
Right.
For something to be scientific, it has to be able to produce verifiable, replicatable results across a spectrum. That's a fundamental tenet of science. When you're running an experiment, you have to be able to verify and reproduce it across a wide variety of factors and environments. You have to be able to control the variables, right? Well, you can't do that with this because, as you said, the variables are different with each different DAW you might be on, with different processing software you might be on, and then again, for your eventual hearers, for the people that are going to be listening to your voiceover or your audiobook, their platform, their speaker, their smartphone, their headphones, their monitors, what they're listening on is going to be fundamentally different. So you can call it a lot of things, and if you end up liking its result, okay, that's a subjective thing, and that's fine. We're all entitled to our own opinion. But it's not scientific. It's absolutely not.
Yeah, and here's the one thing that really kind of pushes my buttons. There's a certain range that people are doing this in that are required for people to actually understand what you're saying well. And if I go through here and diminish this and widen this out so that visually it kind of looks like this, and I'm in a certain range down here, depending on where we are, I will talk about it in another video, but there are some ranges that are critical for other people to understand you. And let's say you had a section of your voice that you don't like, and so what do? You diminish it. And really what's happened here is you have cut some of the frequencies that everybody else needs to understand you clearly. So one of my big pushbacks on it are these people telling you to do it, are sometimes telling people to cut areas of their voice that when they do that, I instantly know, man, if someone had to listen to that for hours, it's going to be harder for them to hear, and they won't even know why. But you've taken out some of the best parts, the things that let their brain decode your message. People don't need to hear what I sound like and love me. They need to love my message. They need to want to hear, they need to be emotionally moved by you and me. But here's the promise. Most people should not be doing this sweep stuff because it makes your audio worse when it's played back across many, many devices. There are so many moving parts. When somebody simplifies it and says, here's a method that will give you gold without doing much, just do it, sweep through, find the bad things, take them out. I promise you that is not a vehicle for long-term success in this business.
Yep, so that's a summation, and there's a lot more that we could say on this. If you want to talk to Don privately. He'd be happy to talk at length about this. As with all these topics, we're trying to simplify this down as much as we can. That is one of the difficult things with this. It's like a lot of other fields where people will throw out a certain theory or idea, maybe based on a couple studies they read, and it would take hours to debunk that based on actually explaining what those scientific studies really said. And you'd have to introduce a bunch of concepts and build a bunch of backstory there to really have the foundation to be able to explain it 100%. So we don't have time for that here. But if you want to talk to Don further offline about this, he's always happy to do that. And if you're looking for a ready-made system, setup, and processing stack that can increase your audio quality and dramatically cut your editing and processing time, we can do that over at vojumpstart.com. Just head there and set up your free session with Don to talk about your unique situation and how we can make it work for you. Again, vojumpstart.com. Click on the click here to schedule your free consult link. Get that set up right now. For Don Barnes, I'm Donnie Barnes. We'll talk to you on the next episode of Audio Barnyard.
And we look forward to seeing you on the wires. Bye-bye.